Let us now begin. It's 8:35. Pranam, everyone. We continue with the second sutra, Shri Pancha Sutra. Namo Arihantanam, Namo Siddhanam, Namo Ayaryanam, Namo Uvachayanam, Namo Sabvasahunam, Eso Pancha Namukkara Sabva Pava Pranasano, Mangalanam Cha Sabvesan Padamam Hari Mangalam. Namo Durvara Ragadi Vairivara Ravarine, Arhate Yoginachaya Mahavirayatayane, Panna Kecha Sarindrecha Koshike Pada Sansvashi, Nirvishesha Manaskaya Shri Veera Samini Namo. Today is Chaitra Sud Ekam, and it just marks the beginning of the year for many people in many states across India. Before we begin with our regular Swadhyay, one thing that I'd like to draw our attention to is how on social media and also in common parlance among Jains today, this includes certain Mahatmas as well. There have been, you know, um, messages about Shri Gautam Swami Bhagwan's Janma, and some have even written Janma Kalyanak today, which uh, has no relevance or significance in the Jain Shasan. This is in the sense that so far we haven't come across any Shastra part, and if there are, uh, one must ask those who refer to these to produce these Shastra parts as to when the Janma of Gautam Swami Bhagwan happened. Secondly, the usage of the word Kalyanaks is exclusively reserved for Tirthankar Bhagwans alone, because only a Tirthankar Bhagwan's Janma, Diksha, etc., only the events in their life are powerful enough to influence others in the way that they can. And thirdly, in any event, in the Jain Shasan, apart from Sri Tirthankar Bhagwans, the Janma of no other Mahatma, even if it is a Tadbhav Ghami Mahatma, even if it is a Samanya Kevli, even if it is a Gandhar Bhagwant, is not allowed. But this is because at the time of Janma, it is only Tirthankar Bhagwans who have that innate state of purity that they do. No other Mahapurush, no matter how big of a sadhak atma they might be, have this state. So keeping all of this in mind, one must exercise their vivek before uh, you know engaging into any celebration of this sort or whatsoever. Now, having discussed this, we move on to Shri Pancha Sutra. We're currently looking at the second sutra. The first was Shri Pap Pratikhat Gun Bijadhan Sutra, which talked about how a person, in order to attain the Ishtafal in the form of Anant Avyabhat Sukh, has to first sow the seed of Dharma or Gun in their Atma, for which it is mandatory to destroy the Pap that is present. Uh, and for this reason, several methods were shown. Now, keeping this in mind, we saw the three different solutions that were given in the first sutra, that is Chatu Sharan Gaman, seeking Sharan or refuge in the four entities, Sukrut Dushkrut Garha, um, and thirdly Sukrut Anumodna. Now, after doing this over and over, we see time and again that after serving this first step, one actually is able to sow the seed of dharma in them, and having attained the seed of dharma, the Mahatma, the Sadhak Atma, he thinks, what is this? What is special in this seed of dharma that distinguishes the virtues that come with it and the virtues that are generally known as virtues in the entire world? And we saw how different reflections that we could engage in were shared in by the Granthkar Bhagwan himself. Now, having said thus, we move on to look at the Deshwati Dharma that a Grihast accepts, because the immediate fruit of attaining Samyak Darshan, of attaining Dharma, is Virati, restraining ourselves, or stepping back, taking a pause, uh, and that is in the form of permanent nature, taking a pause from activities which engage in unnecessary karma bandh. So we also saw how the Shishya asks a question as to why did you first show Deshvarti Dharma here as opposed to Sarvavarti Dharma, where even though it is the Sarvavarti Dharma that is more important. So the Granthkar Bhagavan offers a reply even to this question, and having offered a reply to this question, he talks of how Deshvarti Dharma usually comes first to people, and it is by practice of this Deshvarti Dharma that a person is able to attain Sarvavarti Dharma. And while this is true, it is important to keep in mind that only that Deshvarti Dharma is truly in the form of Deshvarti, or is truly in the form of Shravak Dharma, when it is in the furtherance of Sadhu Dharma. In this regard, we also saw a couple of different parts, such as Shri Haribhadra Suriji in Lalit Vistara, wherein he says, Sarvavarti uh, Lalasa Khalu Deshavarti Paranama. The true Paranam of Deshvarti lies in the Lalsa, or in the want to take Sarvavarti. A Shravak might not have the Paranam to become a sadhu, but he certainly has the Manorath or the desire to become a sadhu one day or the other. And in order to protect these dharma guns and ensure that they continuously increase, the Granthkar Bhagavan has shown various steps, various bhavnas, and various things to do in this particular granth. Now, the biggest, uh, one of the most obvious things in this granth is the name of this granth, which is, and we should remember, Sadhu Dharma Paribhavana Sutra. Paribhavana, bhavana, as we all know, is reflection or contemplation. Paribhavana, the word pari, as we have seen before, is to look at things from all sides, right? So, Sadhu Dharma Paribhavana Sutra actually talks about Deshvarti Dharma or Grihast Dharma, and what a Shravak should do, how he should, uh, you know, engage in his sansaric activities also, in a way that Sarvavarti, the desire to attain Sarvavarti becomes more and more intense, and ultimately he attains the strength to practice Sarvavarti Dharma. So the name of this sutra alone, which talks about Sadhu Dharma Paribhavana, but is actually in the form of directions of Sarvavarti Deshvarti Dharma, Vichramidikadam, is something that is that we must think about. This clearly suggests that Shravak Dharma is only a means to attain Sadhu Dharma, and that Shravak Dharma, which is not intended to attain Sadhu Dharma, is in essence not Shravak Dharma at all. So, no matter how, even if the Shravak is of the highest level, this won't do much. So, in this regard, we saw how the Shravak takes the five Anuvrats, uh, Shiksha Vrats, Kun Vrats, etc., depending on his, his Paranam. And this, having attained this Dharma, how does he try, how does he attempt or endeavor to, to observe these dharmas that he has accepted? So, in that regard, we saw a very, very important part wherein it says, Padivajyuna Palane Jaija, Sayana Gahagesya, Sayana Bhavagesya, Sayana Paratantesya, Anahi Mohavisa Paramavanto, Jalam Dosai Jalanasa, Kamma Vahi Chigachasatham, Kappa Payava Seva Falasa. It says that in order to endeavor in dharma and to ensure that the dharma that we have accepted remains with us, a Shravak should firstly, the Tikakar Bhagwan specifies this, he should always become Agya Grahak. He should seek Bhagwan's Agya in respect of everything that he does. So, having said that, he should be Agya Grahak. How should he become Agya Grahak is the question that is posed in the Tika. To which the Tikakar Bhagwan says that there are two ways. One is Adhyayan, that is studying, and the second is Shravan, that is listening. So, by listening to the Shastras, listening to Vyakhyans and the Shastras, on the one hand, and on the other hand, studying these Shastras, these Granths, a person understands what the Agya of Arihan Paramatma is, and having understood this Agya of Arihan Paramatma, he accepts it because he's applying his mind in accepting it, and that is how it becomes Agya Grahak. So, on the one hand, we're talking about being Agya Grahak, and on the other hand, we're looking at seeing the scriptures. So, what is the, how, what is the common point between the two, or how you're talking of A and B, but how are A and B related? So, Haribhaja Sureshwari Maharaj, as we saw the last time, puts this, he puts this equation in one single sentence. He says, Agya Agama Uchyate. Agya is nothing else but the Agam of this Shasan. Because this Agya of Arihan Paramatma has been in an inadulterated manner uh, been preserved in the Agams. And thus the Agya and the Agam are both synonymous words which can be used interchangeably. Uh, Having attained this Agya, and when a person does Grahan of this Agya, he is supposed to reflect or do anupreksha on what Bhagwan's Agya is. While doing anything, something as simple as brushing their teeth or getting a haircut, uh, and when I say this, I'm so glad to see that some of the Shravaks here actually think about Bhagwan's Agya, which often percolates down to something as tiny as haircuts uh, in grants like Shraddha Vidhi. I remember Yash Bhai asking me about uh, when a person could or could not get a haircut, what is Bhagwan's Agya in this regard. So honestly, Anubodhana of all of these tiny, tiny, tiny efforts that go into preserving Bhagwan's Agya in all possible manners. Having done Anupreksha of what Bhagwan's Agya is, a person becomes imbibed with Bhagwan's Agya. So first, a person becomes Agya Grahak. Secondly, a person does Anupreksha of this Agya, and then he imbibes himself with this Agya. That is, he becomes Agya Bhavak. And having imbibed himself with this Agya of Paramatma, he becomes, and the adjective here is Sada. Sada Agya Partantra. He becomes completely bound, or he completely works under the ambit, under the scope of Bhagwan's Agya. Whatever he does, he'll ensure that he knows that this is the scope of Bhagwan's Agya. I do not want to step out of that. I do not want to exceed that in whatever I do. So he might have he might have taken Virti only to to a very limited extent. But even in that, while doing anything that he might do, he will always see what he can do as so as to ensure that the least hensas involved, and he tries to exploit that activity in a way such that maximum nirjara is achieved. So here also we understand very clearly that upon attaining dharma, Bhagwan's Agya is the first and foremost important thing, which is why Kumarpal Maharaja, in his Sadharan Jain Stavan, firstly, what a beautiful composition he made at the age of 84 when he attained Dharma. He learned Sanskrit at such an advanced stage, and he learned it also in such a way that he not only learned or studied different granths, but he also was able to compose his own new granths. And this Kumarpal Maharaja, who's because of whose efforts today, a lot of um, even the culture of Gujarat uh, is imbibed with so many non-violent activities and values. That's all the credit goes to him. This Kumarpal Maharaja, in his Sadharan Jan Stavan, in the 32nd or 33rd Gatha, I believe it's the 33rd, in the last Gatha, uh, he tells Paramatma in his concluding prayer, Praptastvam bahubhi shubha stri jagata, Chudamanir devata, Nirvanapi bhurasavapi guru, Shri Hemachandra Vapo, Tannatah paramasti vastu kimapi swamin yadabhyarthaye, Kintu tadvachanadaram pratibhavam, stad vardhamano bhavam. He says, it is because of enormous punya that I have attained a Paramatma, a Dev Tattva like Aryan Bhagwan, like you, who is the crown jewel of all three worlds. It is because of enormous and unimaginable punya that I have attained as my guru, Shri Hemchandracharya Bhagwant, who is a charioteer on the path of Nirvana. Having attained these two, there is nothing, there's not even a third thing that I want from you, Bhagwan. But if I were to ask for something, it is only this. And he says, Kintu tadvachanadaram pratibhavam stad vardhamano bhava. Till I attain moksha, in every birth, may my adar bhav, may my bahuman, my respect for your vachan, that is your agya, increase continuously and continually. It's such a beautiful prayer to think of because of all the things that he could ask for, and even the same tattva can be expressed in multiple ways. But he chooses to say that may my adar for your vachan, for Paramatma's agya, increase in every birth. And this makes us wonder that in every anushthan that we do, it is so important to see what Bhagwan's agya is. And it is because of this respect towards Bhagwan's agya that Kamarpal Maharaja, whenever there was any turbulent situation, he would always see what Bhagwan's agya would be, what the Shasan says in this regard, and he would. and he- But the word Paratantrata is used in the sense of Anushasan. So he would willingly accept the Anushasan, the discipline of this Shasan. Because even, in a very traditional concept, if you've seen different fields, different farms, uh, if there's a field which yields a very hard, which yields a very nice yield, which is say an orchard or a crop which offers edible grains, you'll always see a fence around that. But if it's a field of some crop such as tobacco, you won't see it because even a donkey won't try to enter a field like that, which suggests that things that are valuable, that are expensive, are often bound by boundaries, by certain limitations, because that is not to crack down on the entity inside, but rather to protect its worth and its significance. That's the same exact same thing that Bhagwan's Agya does, which is why the word Agya Paratantrata is not something to be scared of, but it's something to happily accept, because this Agya Paratantrata is something that is going to give us Swatantrata, or actual freedom for a lifetime, for eternity. So a person first becomes Agya Grahak, he becomes Agya Bhavak then by imbibing himself with this Agya, and then he becomes Agya Paratantra. This Paratantrata of Bhagwan's Agya not only helps when he's doing dharma, but also when he's engaging in different activities, such as, say, a person has seen someone attractive, and he's having um, thoughts which are filled with vikars. A person, for instance, might immediately think of Shri Uttadhyan Sutra, wherein Bhagwan says Sallam Kama Visam Kama Kama Asi Visosava. And in this sutra, Uttadhyan Sutra, Mahavasami Bhagwan says that calm, or attachment towards any of the pleasures of the five senses is like a shalya. It's like a thorn. It's like a poison. It's like an instant poison, and uh, a person who enters in calm always goes to Durgati. So this is one verse, for instance. By thinking of verses like these, even when he's engaging in calm, or he's engaging in any uh, podgalic activity, he will immediately be able to restrain his mind and minimize the intensity with which he's involved in it, even if he has to, as a last resort, do that activity. So you see, there are people who might be actually doing lesser pop in person, or in a way that appears to other people. But even if a Shravak is seemingly engaging by way of intense avarti karma, he might have to engage in certain activities. Because of that, even when he does them, he will do them with very less intensity. And it is because of this that even in the Vandita Sutra, it is written Aposi hoi bandho, jena na nidham dhasam kunai. When the bandh uh, when a Shravak does pop, even the karma bandh is very low, because his parinam are not nidvans. This softness of the parinam, the this softness of the parinam comes because a Shravak has understood Bhagwan's agya, he has imbibed Bhagwan's agya in his heart, and he has become, he has uh, you know accepted Bhagwan's Agya as supreme and himself his own desires as subordinate. So even by way of moha, if he has to engage in an activity which would not befit him otherwise, he will do it in a manner that leads to a minimal karma bandh, and he will never try to justify such behavior. So by practicing this Deshwari Dharma in this manner, uh, he ultimately, bit by bit, gathers the strength to practice Sri Sarvavarti Dharma, and upon actually taking Sarvavarti Dharma, he becomes more and more nirlep, and this parinam of being nirlep reaches a full maximum, and this Atma becomes Vitarag and Sarvagya. He destroys all his pap and he goes to moksha. So this is the essence of Haribhadra Saraswati Maharaja's words, Sarvavirti Lalasaha Khalu Adya Deshavirti Parinamaha. That true Parinam of Deshvirti is the Lalsa of Sarvavirti. Now, having said that, the Granthkar Bhagwan, as he saw, he gives different, he compares Bhagwan's Agya to different things, such as the the mantra to cure the poison of moha and so on. We've seen that, so we're not repeating that. Now, having said that, we also saw how the Granthkar Bhagwan talks of doing away with the company of Adharma Mitras, because there are various ways in which they can influence us, and ultimately, if nothing else, even the mere company, their company around us, leads to a lot of pap by way of anumati. And we saw how the example of Shripal Maina in this regard, if I remember correctly. Now, having said that, what else should a Shravak do? So, this is what the Granthkar continues to say. He says, Pariharijya sammam loga viruddhe anukampa pare jananam न खिंसा विज्ज धम्मम संकेलेसो खु ऐसा परम बोहि बियम अबोहि फलमप्पणोति. A Shravak should do away with everything that is lok virudh. Now, this lok virudh term, we'll look at it in some detail because it can lead to a lot of confusion. The second thing that he says, well, it's a continuation of everything that he's stating. He says one should be ready to engage in anukampa towards the lok, towards the society. One should not do something that leads to the society condemning dharma, because if a person were to do ninda of dharma, that parinam of doing ninda of dharma is in the form of is in the form of sanklesh, is in the form of intense rag and dvesh, and this sanklesh is the seed of param abodhi. It is the seed of supreme mithyatva. And when a person acts in a way that causes people to criticize dharma, and because of this criticizing, they attain extreme mithyatva, the person who causes people to do such ninda also ends up, doing the bandh of extreme or supreme mithyatva. That is to say, him attaining dharma in the near future becomes next to impossible. So whether or not he will attain dharma in the infinite times after is something that one really has to wonder about. And showing the dangers of Lokaru Dharma, the Granthkar Bhagwan says that a person should reflect on the dangers of acting in a Lokvirudh manner, and he should remember that there is no bigger trouble than acting in this manner, and because of this, he should not he should stay away from every possible Lokvirudh karya. So what exactly qualifies as Lokvirudh is something that has to be understood well, because one might take the superficial or the seeming meaning, and knowing us will always take the meaning that is favorable to us. And if we take it to mean, oh, we should not act in a way that the society dislikes, or something that the society is against, then we'll reach a point where we'll have to stop all our dharmic activities altogether, because be it something like Bal Diksha, or be it celebrating any particular Mahotsav with a lot of pomp and glory, a lot of adambar, people, and the majority of people in this day and age will always be against it, and they'll be like, we don't like this. This is causing a nuisance, or in context of Bal Diksha, or in context of Diksha altogether, they will be like, what is this practice? How does a person leave his own parents? This is so cruel. And you might actually feel that the society as a whole, or at least the majority of the society, is against this. So this still qualifies Lok Virudh. This is something that needs to be understood. Yes, exactly. Yash, this is the opposite of Shasan Prabhav now. This is Shasan Malinya. This is Shasan Apabhrajna, which leads to extreme mithyatva. And Bhagwan Haribhadra Swishiji Maharaja, in his Granth Ashtak Prakaran, he has blocked 8 gathas. So Ashtak Prakaran has 32 different topics, and each of them are, they deal with each of the every topic has 8 gathas. There's a specific ashtak known as Shasan Malinya Nishedh Ashtak. That is an ashtak or 8 gathas on prohibiting the malinya or the degradation of the shasan among people. So in these 8 gathas, honestly, one might think these are just 8 gathas, but the tattva in each of these gathas is extremely immense. In this Shasan Malinya Nishedh Ashtak, Haribhadra Swishiji Maharaja points out the exact same thing that is being pointed out here. He talks of how uh, a person should not act in a way, or he should not practice things in a way that leads to people attaining a dharma, people becoming further away from the shasan. And he also shows the benefits of shasan prabhavna. How, if a thing is done in a shasan prabhavak manner, it can, even if it leads to one person praising Jin Shasan in a very ordinary manner, in a comparative manner as opposed to a superlative manner, even that person is bound to attain Samyak Darshan in the future. So he shows us both sides in this Ashtak. Now, uh, here the Granthkar Bhagavan is saying something very similar. He says that a person should not uh, act in a Lokvirudh manner, because when a person acts in a Lokvirudh manner, he is leading others towards Mithyatva, and also ultimately leading himself towards Mithyatva. So, in furtherance of this, he gives us certain directions that, certain people often think. First, we saw how Ashraf should not act in an Agnya Virudh manner. Now, the other Granth Karbhagan is saying that you should not act even in a Lok Virudh manner. So, the dharma that we do has to be, it should pass the clearance of Bhagwan's Agya, and also the clearance test of whether or not it is Lok Virudh. Because whether or not it is Lok Virudh is also part ultimately of Bhagwan's Agya. Uh, so, in view of this, he says that a Shravak, for this reason particularly, should also Anukampa Pare Jananam. He should also continuously engage in Anukampa. We have seen the nature of Anukampa Dan again in good detail about 2 years ago when we were discussing the 15 steps of Adhyatma Prapti. This Anukampa Dan, we're not going to the detail now, but one of the main reasons to do it is to do Shasan Prabhavna and save the Shasan from Apabrajna. Now, I'll give you an example. Pethad Shah, who is the minister of Malwa, present day Madhya Pradesh, he had a desire to build a Janalaya in a neighboring kingdom, which was actually an enemy kingdom of the state that he was minister of. In order to do this, he first analyzed the entire region, and he saw that everyone in that capital city is Mithyadrashti. Everyone is no one is aware, or no one is fond of the Jain dharma, and those who are turned against it. In this situation, if I were to ask to build a temple there, I probably won't get the sanction to do so. His reason for building a Dirasar there is very simple, that people get in touch with the Jinalaya, and ultimately by getting in touch with the Jin Mandir, they would get in touch with the Dharma as well, and ultimately, there would be an influx of Mahatmas in that city as well, and then they would naturally attain Dharma, the residents of that city. So, in order to do this, Pethar Shah constructs a Dan Shala in the city, or very about far from the city, and this danshala feeds thousands of people on a daily basis with the highest forms of food, um, and food and drink, and everyone who passes by it obviously offers food free of charge, and everyone who passes by is amazed by it. On the people inquire obviously who is the charitable person, the philanthropist who's running this institution, and how is he feeding everyone, each of us in such a nice way. So Pethacha's men have been instructed to give the name of the minister of the neighboring kingdom of the state in which this is happening, and they do so. And this goes on for a while, and people start praising the minister of this kingdom. And he wonders, and he's extremely Mithyajashi, he wonders, you know, I mean, I'm not running any such organization. So, what exactly is happening here? And he inquires further and further, and he finds out that the minister of Malwa, Shri Pethar Shah Mantri, has been running this Danshala. So, he immediately arranges for a meeting with Pethar Shah, and he's very humbled by this gesture, and he's like, why is this happening? Why are you doing this in my name? Why not do it in yours? What is your reason for doing so? And now this minister has also attained so much fame that to do away with such fame is not possible for him. So he asked Petar Shah, what do you want in return? So Petar Shah says, look, I don't want anything else, but I want I want a Jin Mandir to be erected in the capital city in a way that is in the main path while going to the king's palace. So in the prime location of the city, he's asking for a Jin Mandir to be constructed. Now this minister, he has i- unwillingly also uh, been burdened by such a big favor by way of Pethar Shah's activities in the name of this minister that he cannot refuse to say no. He cannot refuse to the minister's plea. So the minister agrees, and he tells the king this, and he, the plan is sanctioned, and a beautiful Jin Mandir is built. Now the people there, uh, the story continues, but this is the relevant purpose, the relevant part for our Swadhyay right now. The story continues, and once the foundation stone of the temple is being laid, there is sweet water emerging from that particular place. Now it so happens that in the entire city, wherever they've been digging wells or any other water body, the water that would come out would be salty in nature. But here naturally the water would be sweet. It was fresh water. So these people, they told the king that, look, the place that he has chosen is not fit for a temple because there's fresh water here. Everywhere else in the city we have salt water, and if there's fresh water in this one place, we should have a temple of our religion here and not of the Jain religion. And the king, the entire public is weighing heavy on the king, and the king has made an inquiry to do this. Now imagine this news reaches the king when the king is getting a haircut done. And the Danshala of Pethar Shah, the influence of this Danshala has not left a single soul untouched in the entire city of this particular king. So even the barber who's giving the king a haircut has ultimately become a fan of Pethar Shah. And Pethar Shah has been living in the city ever since the plan of building this Janala has come into picture. So at midnight, this barber, he very discreetly comes to Pethar Shah's residence, bows down to him, and tells him that this is the entire situation, and the king has been burdened by the public uh, to build a Hindu temple there. So do as you please. And Pethar Shah, overnight, on hearing this, he steps out. He goes out of the city, out of the city's boundaries, and back then we all know that cities were gated, in a castle of sorts, in a fortress of sorts. So he steps out of the city, and ordinarily the soldiers would question people if they had to go in and out. But Pethar Shah had achieved such glory there. even though he was running the entire thing in the name of this minister, that no one would even dare to ask him why he's going. He goes out and he uses sources to fetch sacks and sacks of salt water of salt, and he empties the contents of the entire sacks of salt into that into that foundation ground. So the water the next day, the king with his men, he comes to inspect that place, and they have the water tasted, and it turns out to be super salty. So the king dismisses what he thinks are now rumors, and he has the Janalaya built. Once the Janalaya is built, uh, everything that Petharsha Shah desired actually happens. People start coming, Mahatmas start coming in. The people become curious about the dharma, and they attain, dharma in this manner, and ultimately they attain Samyak Darshan. Many of them would would have also done aradhana of this dharma and gone to a good place. Many of them will in the future. The point of it all is, ordinarily speaking, opening institutions like hospitals or schools or even danshalas for that matter uh, is not part of dharma. However, opening a danshala in situations like these, where there is an immediate connection that can be established between people attaining dharma and the said activity, such anukampa dan is not only prescribed but heavily endorsed by the dharma. Similarly, in extreme situations wherein there's a famine or there's a disaster, there's a shortage of foods, food, clothing, supplies, etc. Throwing open places to serve people food, to help people in disasters, to ensure that they get their necessary aid, etc. Helping them out in all of these manners is anukampa, which is very much encouraged in the dharma. But this same activity, when it extends to ordinary circumstances, and in when it is forced to apply in cases of building hospitals, schools, colleges, etc., this has nothing to do with dharma. This, in fact, so-called anukampa attacks the very foundation of dharma, because the reasons for this we have seen in the Dan Batrisi by Upadhyay Shri Maharaja, and the Dan Batrisi we referred to extensively in the Swadhyay earlier. So uh, please check out the notes from those Swadhyay sessions. Now we continue here, and the Shravak says that if I am doing Anukampa, if I were to not do Anukampa, people would obviously not attain dharma, which is why in every activity a Shravak does, this is mainly for a Shravak who has the required means. In every activity that he does it in a manner that Anukampa is always involved, which is why we even today we see that whenever a Janala is built, we ensure that the villagers in that particular area are well fed, or uh, for in cases of Shasan Prabhavna, wherein a person is taking Diksha, there's another Mahotsav. Anukampadana is also a part of Dharma there. So all of these things are the boundaries of Anukampadana, and also the cases in which it is heavily encouraged. All of these have to be kept in mind. So, having said thus, the uh, one thing that naturally occurs to us is, what are deeds that are lok virudh. So the answer is that those things which are generally accepted not by the society at large but by the community of wise men, by the community of men whose values are in sync with the Arya nations, are accepted as lok virudh, or lok anusar krityas. So anything that transgresses that would essentially be lok virudh. You remember, these are all ultimately also social deeds. Some of them could have an overlap of sorts, and some of them could have a very strong element of dharma also present in them. But ultimately, all of these being in the nature of lok virudh karyas is, in the context of lok virudh. The Granth Panchashat Prakaran by Harimal Shri Maharaja, Prashamrati, which is composed by Umasati Maharaja, the Tika on Prashamrati, which I believe is also composed by Haribhata Seshji Maharaja. These grunts, among others, they specify what Lok Virudh Karyas, include. So this includes, for instance, for Sadhu Bhagans, this includes that, going to the households of people who observe the Sutak, that is, Sutak is like a temporary, depending on where what community you're part of, a 10, 12, or 40-day long period wherein a person is born and the family abstains from all social activities. So when a sadhu, in communities where this is not allowed or accepted, if a sadhu were to go to such houses for Gojri, similarly in case of someone's death, if a sadhu were to go to such houses for Gojri, this is such activity of Gojri is lok virudh for a sadhu. This is mentioned in the Agams. Should a Jain follow this Sutak and Patak? The answer is no. There is no need to follow it in terms of what the society does it, because dharma shows us different boundaries altogether. If a person is if there is a person who's born in a particular family, only the woman who has delivered the particular who's delivered the baby, until they become clean from the postpartum blood, etc., they are not allowed to do puja. Everyone else can do puja freely. Nothing changes at all. Similarly, in the case of death, if a person touches the dead body and they have attained this laukik ashuddhata in this manner, uh, they can take a bath and continue to go to do puja, and this applies for everyone in the family. There's no moratorium period with respect to doing puja. This is well established in several grants, as also discussing this with Naman Bhai earlier last week. In grants like Heer Prashna, Sen Prashna, etc., uh, one is free to go check these parts. More lok virudh karyas involve taking food from houses which are forbidden or which are ostracized by the society. So houses of families that are known as shudra families in the society. Now this will often change with times, because in India, uh, by law, such discrimination between the castes is not allowed. But if the society, if this particular definition of the society continues to ostracize these elements, a sadhu also, for as long as this ostracization continues, cannot go to such houses for taking gochi. Similarly, uh, in a particular eating foods and drinks that are looked down upon in this society of wise men, such as these foods include meat, alcohol, garlic, bahubij, anantkai, etc. All of these, also, they're obviously detrimental from a spiritual manner, but they're also lok virudh karyas. So one must also ensure that a person does away with these activities, also because they are lok virudh. Intercaste, so inter-religious marriage is something that is dharma virudh in the first manner, because if you look at, and it is also lok virudh, because if you see uh, the qualities of a Marganusari person, in the 35 qualities of a Marganusari person as prescribed in the grants like Dharma Sangra, etc. Uh, I believe the second quality is that if such a Marganusari person has to marry, they would marry in a family which is of the same jati but a different gotra. So this alone shows that you know there would be a similarity in terms of dharma. Earlier also we saw examples of inter-religious marriages happening, but that doesn't make it valid or sanctioned. Even in communities where this could be perhaps allowed, it would still be lok virudh and dharma virudh, and ultimately it's going to lead into, in ordinary circumstances there could be exceptions, but exceptions won't make this the norm or normalize this. By and large, it would lead to one of the spouses forsaking their dharma, and if there is any offspring, which in most cases there would be, the offspring would also suffer from not getting the right, dharmic upbringing. So one really has to consider these aspects. So in Panchashak, there are several other things that are mentioned as Lokarut Karyas. If one wants, if someone wants the list, I can send the list on Panchashak Prakran. But these include, criticizing any member of the society, especially if someone in the society is known to be virtuous, if someone in the society has a creditable and honorable meritorious standing, and you criticize them in public, you are doing a lok virudh karya, because the society is ultimately going to point fingers at you, and they'll be like, look, this Jain is saying this, and that would lead to adharma happening. People criticizing the dharma, them attaining mithyatva or strengthening their mithyatva, and ultimately this criticizer also attaining mithyatva. So this entire chain has to be kept in mind for every low virudh activity that we do, because when we act in, we can't be individuals who are separate from our dharma. So when we do any activity, we have to ensure that dharma does not suffer because of us. So, similarly, if a person whose intelligence is low, whose intellect is low, and they are practicing any dharma kriya, and because of their lack of understanding or intelligence, if they're doing a particular dharma kriya in a bad, or in a deformed or incomplete manner, if you laugh at them, that is also lok virudh for obvious reasons, because that person will ultimately think he's seasoned, he's experienced. Instead of helping me out, he's laughing at me. Like, who wants a dharma like this? What's the point of attaining, dharma? And I'm sure that a lot of us, or in fact, all of us who are listening right now, we can think of instances wherein we have heard the exact sentence from several people. That is in them saying that he does so much, he fasts so much, or he does so and so, but ultimately he acts in this manner. So what's the point of it all? Of course, there is no way such a behavior could be justified, but the fact is that people are ultimately going to, you know, point fingers towards your dharma, whether we like it or not. So acting in a lokanusari manner is very important, which is why even in Jai Viray, of the few things that one is permitted to ask Paramatma for, one of the things that Gandhar Bhagwan put is Loga Viruddha Chao, Tyag of Lok Viruddha activities. Uh, Similarly, people that are, that the entire society is against, if you maintain contact or relations with them, that is also Lok Virudh. Say, a terrorist, for example, because people are going to associate you with your dharma, and they will talk of your association with the said terrorist, or a criminal, or someone who is generally of a bad reputation in the society. Similarly, transgressing the boundaries of a person's country, the particular time period, or the particular family that they belong to, that is also Lok Virudh. uh, Uvvana Bhogo, a person who engages in activities of pleasure which are not appropriate among the lok, that is also lok virudh. Similarly, if a person is doing a lot of dan or a lot of tap, if you go on talking about yourself, if you keep on revealing these activities among people, that is also lok virudh. uh, Now, when a person who is close to you, your own friends or family, and uh, they are in a difficult set of circumstances, and you don't help them out, this inactivity or this omission is also lok virudh. So, in order to do sadhu dharma paribhavna, to reflect on the sadhu dharma and to prepare the atma for sadhu dharma, if a person attains, if a person practices activities that are lok, which that are lok virudh, his dharma ultimately is going to be affected, and it will lead to him attaining mithyatva, forget sarvavirti. So it's important to keep this in mind. Uh, and then several examples, in terms of lok virudh karyas are also given here. Now, we saw the last Swadhyay session, how a person should leave the company of adharma mitras. So we saw that on one hand. Now the Granthkar Bhagavan comes back to the same topic of dharma mitras, and he talks about this extensively. He says, Sevejya dhammamitte vihanenam andho via anukaddhage vahyo viva vijje dariddo via isare bhiyo via mahanayage न इयो सुंदरतरमन्नम ती बहुमानजुत्तेसिया आणाकंखी आणापडिच्छगे आणा अभिराहगे Ana Nipfa Yageti. So the Granthkar Bhagwan says here, he firstly gives four similes to compare Dharma Mitras, and he shows five different ways or five different steps to engage with these Dharma Mitras or Kalyan Mitras. Give me 1 second. Sorry for that. So the first is a blind person who knows that he's blind, who does not have the sight or the vision to walk on the path. Uh, when he finds a person that is able to see, that has a vision larger or more penetrative than his, if he's wise enough, what he will do is he will follow in the footsteps of such a person who has the vision to go on that path. If he doesn't, he might end up being hit by something or someone on the road and he'll fall off the path, and anything of that sort could happen. Similarly, a person who who knows that he does not have a very refined or a very sukshma bodh of the sanmarg, but he knows that I have to cross this path, I want to go on the other end. For such a person, he should follow in the footsteps or he should walk along with a person who has that refined bodh. The second example that the Granthkar Bhavan gives here is Vahyo Vivavejje, a Vyadhit person, a person who has who's suffering from some disease, from a physical disease. uh, if he's wise enough, he will do exactly as the doctor instructs him to do. If the doctor asks him to, refrain from eating from XYZ amount of hours, he will do so. If the doctor asks him to have only liquids, he will do so. And he knows, because he knows that by serving these instructions, I am ultimately going to regain my lost health. Similarly, a Shravak who has been suffering a lot in this sansar, like every other person, he knows that if I do not listen to the instructions of my Dharma Mitra, I will end up doing Viradhana of my Shravak Dharma. And by doing Viradhana of my Shravak Dharma, I won't be able to attain spiritual welfare. Because we saw in the very beginning, when we started the Sutra, in the very introductory part of the Granthkar Bhagwan says that once you accept a particular dharma and you then do viradhana or violate that particular dharma, the consequences of that are extremely scary. So, out of fear of poor health, etc., just like a diseased patient does not go against the instructions of the doctor, a Shravak also is fearful of the consequences of roaming around in the sansar, and because of that, he will not uh, act in a manner that transgresses the instructions of his dharma mitra. The third uh, example show and all of these examples, these four examples are only given so that a Shravak who is who does the Swadhyay of this particular Granth, he uh, he becomes more and more resolved to seek the instructions of his dharma mitra. It's very beautifully put here, because time and again, if you see, there's a constant pattern, and the Granthkar Bhavan has very beautifully, wherever needed, shown the importance of pranidhan. And to make this pranidhan stronger, they have used several examples, several stories, uh, several analogies as well, to make our resolution stronger. So, in the third example, uh, that is Dariddo via Isare. So, just like a person who is poor, he will follow. Now, the word Ishwar here is not used in the sense of God. Ishwar means someone who has Aishwarya. Aishwarya here is in a very literal, crude sense. That is the meaning of wealth. So, person who is poor, he will try to walk in the footsteps of those who are rich, those who are wealthy. And this is, of course, this doesn't need much of an elaboration. We see that today, whoever wants to succeed in the materialistic world, we find them reading about the lives of, from a materialistic viewpoint, successful people, wealthy people. People read about the biographies of these people. They read self-help books which contain anecdotes from the lives of these people, and so on. So, for these people, uh, to get into the path of wealth, they think it is right to follow or walk in the footsteps of a person who is wealthy. The same has to be applied in case of dharma, wherein a Shravak who wants to walk on this path, he will take, he will follow the examples of Shravaks who are on the same path as him but who've reached, who've gone much higher. He will try to see what their schedule is like, what learnings they could take from their lives, etc. And the fourth is Bhiyo Viyo Mahanayage. So a person who is scared, just like a person who is scared follows a Mahanayak. That is, when a person is in a scary place, like say a forest, uh, or a dark alley, and he finds a leader to take him out of that particular place. Similarly, a Shravak who knows the very difficult and fearful situation of the sansar, if he finds a Dharma Mitra, he will count on him to take him out of that particular place. And having said that, the Grankar Bhagwan says, No io sundaratara mannamti. So he uses something that is in a superlative manner. He says that there is nothing better. Na io sundaratara mannamti. There is nothing more beautiful, more appropriate, nothing better than uh, than the sevan of a dharma mitra. There is nothing better or nothing more beautiful than acting in accordance with the instructions of these dharma mitras. Having said that, he prescribes 5 tiny steps to engage with these dharma mitras, which are Bahumana Juttesya, Ana Kankhi, Ana Padichhage, Ana Avirahage, Ana Nipfayage Ti. So here he says that the first thing he says is a person must be full of Bahuman towards the Dharma Mitra. This means that a Shravak who is endeavoring to attain Sadhu Dharma and who wants to attain the requisite Paranam to attain Sadhu Dharma, for him, the Sevan of a Dharma Mitra is the strongest solution. And we often see from people who take Diksha. Nowadays, we hear a lot of these interviews as well about what motivated them to take Diksha. We see that in so many situations, most of these people have taken Diksha because of the nimit of a Dharma Mitra. Now, this Dharma Mitra could be one of their parents or both of their parents. It could be their friends. It could be their Guru Bhagwan. But ultimately, it is by doing the sevan of this Dharma Mitra that they have furthered their journey and they have attained Sadhu Dharma. So this is, if we see, this is an actual uh, fructification of what the Sutrakar Bhagwan is saying here. He says that there is no more beautiful solution to serve than the instructions of a Dharma Mitra. So he should become number one, endowed with Bahuman towards the Dharma Mitra, and then do sevan of this Dharma Mitra. The second is, after becoming Bahuman Yuk towards the Dharma Mitra, if the Dharma Mitra does not if the Dharma Mitra does not prescribe any agnya for the Shravak, then they should still be Ana Kankhi. They should be Agnya Kankshi. That is, they must have a desire to attain the Agya, from the Dharma Mitra. Which is why, so here what the Grankar Bhagan is saying is that by being desirous of the Dharma Mitra's Agnya, the Shravak continuously motivates himself to do dharma, and he time and again he keeps on asking his dharma mitras, what else can I change in my schedule? What can I add, or what can I do differently in my day, or what can I do in life in general, uh, so that I reduce my traveling in this sansar, and that I am able to train myself to practice Sanyam. So time and again, when this Shravak himself shows to his Dharma Mitra that I am desirous of your Agnya, I am desirous of obtaining uh, your instructions, your directions, then the Shravak, the Dharma Mitra will also pause and think after hearing several pleas time and again, uh, what is appropriate for this Shravak given his state of mind, given his spiritual state, etc. What can he do such that he attains, the requisite strength to practice Sayam? That is step number two. Ara Kankhi, Agnya Kankshita. The third step is that just like a Shravak should have the Akanksha or the desire of obtaining the Agnya from the Dharmamitra again and again, whenever the Dharmamitra offers or prescribes any particular Agnya, whenever the Dharmamitra does any particular Agnya, Ana Padit he must become Agnya Svikarak. He must accept that particular Agya. He must not at that particular point pause to think that this is not possible for me. Because a Shravak who is full of Vivek, or rather a Dharmamitra who is full of Vivek, whenever he prescribes any particular Agnya, he will prescribe it in a way that is appropriate for his spiritual level, for his Bhumika, and he will prescribe such an Agnya, the observance of which will help increase the Bhav Arogya, the spiritual health of this particular Shravak. Which is why, without even having second thoughts, this Shravak should accept the Agya of his Kalyan Mitras, and excitedly he must immediately begin to engage in that Agya. Uh, Guru Bhagwan had once told me this in a Vachna, uh, or in a particular conversation, if I don't remember at this point, that whenever Guru Bhagwans give the Agya for a particular thing, along with that Agya, they also give the required blessings to fulfill that particular Agya. So one must not think about, how will such an activity be possible. The fourth step is that a person should, such a Shravak should not only accept the said Agya, but he should also become Agya Aviradhak. That is, he should do these activities with such a constant excitement that there is not even an iota of lack of bahuman towards that particular agya, or lack of excitement toward that particular agya, so that any activity that has been prescribed can be done in a niratichar manner. And fifthly and lastly, he must think to himself that this agya alone is beneficial for my spiritual health, which is why the samyag observance of this agya, uh, will make me capable of attaining the sayam that I want to attain. So when he thinks of the fruit of this particular agya as well, uh, a Shravak elicits the Agnya from his Kalyan Mitras, from his Dharma Mitras, and by practicing steps 1 to 5 in this manner, this could be a set of Agnya or individual Agnyas as well. He, even if it is a tiny thing, he will do it in such a manner that ultimately he will, in this birth or the next, attain the requisite virya or the requisite strength to practice Sayyam. Now, having left the company, or having reduced substantially the company of Dharma Mitras, having accepted the company of Kalyan Mitras, of Dharma Mitras, and having abstained from all Lok Virudh Karyas, what should a Shravak do differently to further his spiritual journey? This is something that we'll discuss later. Time's nearly up for now. So we'll conclude the session here, the Swadhyay of the Sutra here. And if there are any questions, let's discuss those.
Pradam Parshvai. Parshvai, if the dan is done only out of compassion, then will it count as Anukampa dan?
So, Anukampa per se does refer to compassion. Anukampa dan is that dan which comes from a paranam of compassion. So ordinarily it would be that, but the circumstances in which the dan has to be done have to be looked at, and Anukampa dan is, it has a lot of, it's a very thin line. Anukampa dan and Kupatra dan, or dan that is forbidden in the Shasan. So one has to weigh the scales very delicately in light of the grunts that Upadaji Bhagwan or other Purvacharya Bhagavans have written. For instance, the general idea is that where there is uh, while doing Anukampa Dan, or while doing an activity that you think is Anukampa Dan, it should not lead to a new chain of violence altogether. So, for instance, let's say the example of a fisherman who is poor and who is suffering and who is hungry. I see that he's hungry, and if he doesn't eat, he will probably suffer. And I am moved by compassion towards him. So, what would be Anukampa Dan that is accepted in this manner is not to throw him a fishing net, because that way also you are ultimately nourishing his sustenance. You helping him live, but that is not allowed. If you are to give him food to survive, that is very much permitted and encouraged as well. So you really have to see what you're doing. If you see, uh, say for instance, you see 100 people who are about to die, or you see them in a calamity or a disaster or any emergency scenario, and you take them to safety, you get them treated. Such treatment is definitely in the form of anukampa, but opening a hospital to to start the treatment of people at large is not anukampa. Similarly, if someone is thirsty on the street and you feed them water, that is anukampa. But having a well dug up to quench people's thirst is not anukampa. So
But uh,
yes,
like for instance, if we help some poor person, but then he starts like eating meat
correct,
or
correct, correct, and this is exactly the premise of the Terapanth sect. The Terapanthis do not believe in anukampa dan, exactly because they think that if you feed a person in this manner, they will continue to do pop and further their sansar, etc. But this is not something that a Shravak has to consider at all, because while helping out a person immediately, where he immediately sees a person in suffering, his desire is only to pull that person out from his suffering. And the reason for that is also because if he does not do so, ultimately the paranam of his atma, the doer, the datas, that is the donor's atma, will become kathor. They'll become harder, and when the paranam are hardened, this becomes this becomes antithetic to practicing dharma. To practice dharma, you always need to have a, a soft heart, komal paranam, which is why a person does anukampa dhan in the first place, because he cannot see others in suffering. Because if he continues to see others in suffering, he will ultimately harden his own heart. So he is not concerned with whatever you do further. Because if you look at it in that manner, any vyavhar that you do in the sansar, say you got into a cab right now, and you paid your fare, or say even better, you tipped the person over the fare. What he does with that money is none of your concern. So it has to be limited to the scope of that.
okay, okay, I get it. And so like opening a hospital is not endorsed by our
Correct.
dharma.
With the maxim is, and Upajaji Maharaj puts it beautifully, Balwan Anishtha Ananubandhi. That is, you should not do any done in a way that it leads to a. So this is the scale, the benefit and the cons, the pros and cons scale. The con scale should not be Balwan. Balwan Anishta Ananubandhi. That is, it should not the scale should not tilt in the favor of the cons, in the sense that it should not lead to a parampara of what is anisht and ananubandhi. That is something that is not desirable. You should not start a chain of that, because when you start a hospital altogether, when you start an institution of this nature, you're ultimately leading to the viradna of so many jeeves on a regular basis. So that is not allowed. But a one-time thing or an instant thing is allowed. So it's a very delicate matter. Unfortunately, a lot of forget Strauss, a lot of sadhu bhagwans also have lost track, and a lot of sadhu bhagwans are in fact inaugurating such hospitals, schools, etc. Uh, a certain sadhu bhagwan, in fact, is credited with with establishing a lot of schools in Mumbai and in Punjab and in Baroda and others in other regions of India. Uh, Now, this Acharya Bhagwant, adding to the credentials of such an Acharya Bhagwant, is not uh, truly adding to their credentials, but it is Utsutra Prarupna. It is something that is not in accordance with the ideals of a Shravak, let alone a Sadhu. So it has to be kept in mind.
Okay, oh, thank you very much. Also, Pashbhai, can you throw some light on Stuli Bhadra Swamiji? Like
Uh,
you said, because you said to practice brahmacharya we can chant a mala of Om Rim Shri Tulibhadra Swamine Namaha.
Correct, correct, correct. So, are you familiar with the story of Slivata Samiji or?
No, unfortunately not.
Okay, no worries. So, I'll send you a document to. This story is rather long. I'll send you a document to for your perusal. But it's a very interesting story. Stulabhadra Swamiji, in the Kalpa Sutra and other granths, it is said that the Tirthankars ordinarily are remembered, most of them well, are remembered for a very limited time period. Such as, for instance, right now, in our Avsarpini Kal, we know the names of the Tirthankars of the past Chauvisi, we know the names of the future Chauvisi, and we know a few scattered names here and there of past or future Chauvisis that will happen, but not all of them. But the point of it all is that Stulabhadra Swamiji, his Brahmacharya Vrat was so strong after taking Diksha that his name will be remembered for 84 Chauvisis. And this is an extraordinary feat in itself. So his Brahmacharya was very pure. Uh, the intensity was also of another grade altogether. Uh, the reasons for this obviously you are derived from his story, which I'll share with you, and we can also go through this together after the call. I believe I'm fine with that. So once you read the story, you will have a sense of Bahuman towards this Mahatma, and then when you do jump of this Mahatma, it will for sure increase in the resolution to practice brahmacharya.
Oh, thank you very much.
Parsh,
Yes, sir.
hi, Pranam. When we are discussing about Lok Virud activity,
Yes.
so how does it affects both the people, like, the person who is criticizing it and the person who initiated that activity? Like, I'm specifically concerned about the person who initiated that activity because usually it's not like intentional.
As in, I didn't get you actually.
Yeah, for example, let's say, like, whenever I get angry at my brother, he tells me that you do this much dharma and you can't even control your anger. So that sounds like the scenario that you mentioned, right? That is a low virud activity because he is criticizing the dharma for my activity.
See, certain things will definitely be out of hand, such as, and we've looked at these examples before, such as when the Tirthankar Bhagwans also establish or show dharma, and subsequently when other sadhu Bhagwans or Updeshaks show dharma, it is natural that people are uh, people are going to criticize the dharma in that manner. So for that, they are not responsible. I mean, you can't hold them accountable too. But on on the contrary, things that are in your hand, and these are things that are in our hand generally, such as us not being able to control our anger, for instance. Now, in cases like these, the how you tackle them while giving a reply is something that is very important, because if you try to justify it, then it leads to it can lead to a lot of other things. They will probably hate on dharma more than ever. In fact, in such cases, it's best to take the onus upon ourselves and very immediately clarify that I'm still learning. So the little that I have in me is
Is not a part of dharma.
exactly it's the little good that I have in me. It's all attributed to Dev Guru Dharma, and the little that isn't is my own shortcoming. So that alone leads to us saving the shasan from a lot of unnecessary apavrajna.
Right, but like I think all the scenarios would fit in a similar way. I'm not sure. Like, I'm not able to make sense of it. That how usually it would be unintentional. So how would someone would be punished for it?
Okay, so uh, let's look at it this way. Now there are certain things, and especially things that happen on a larger social level. They are usually things that are within our control. So, say for instance, when there is a Rath Yatra that is happening, and there's a procession that's happening. If you take it in a very orderly, disciplined manner, it could lead to Shasan Prabhavna. Although there'll be people who criticize it, but if you so as long as you're acting in the ambit of the Shastras and you're carrying out that that Rath Yatra or that Vargoda, that is vihit, that is encouraged by the scriptures, that is permitted by the scriptures. So that's why now exceeding that while carrying out such a procession, because of your lack of discipline, because of your chaotic behavior, or because of your unruliness, if people are criticizing or getting a chance to criticize dharma, that is on you then. So once you, if you're within the ambit of the agams, but within the ambit of what Paramatma's agya is, and you're doing an activity and people criticize it for whatever reasons, that would be reasons attributable to them. But if it is truly because of your own shortcomings or because of you failing to act in the aforementioned lok virud manners, then that's on you.
All right.
Parshvai, why are processions encouraged? Is it like so that people outside Jain Dharma will also observe Dharma and
Yes,
will.
what that's one of the main reasons. Shasan Pravana is the most pressing reason for processions of all sorts. Now, this is the general idea behind the procession. Processions, however, might be taken on account of different causes. So it could be any particular Paramatma's Kalyanak. It could be a Diksharthi's procession, in which case people, the idea is to ensure that people get to know who this. They'd be curious to know what this procession is like, who the Diksharthi is like, or in case of a tap, who a Tapasvi is like. So this sort of adambar is, when done in a fashionable manner, in a way that is amenable to the scriptures, also leads to Shasan Prabhavna. And in fact, it is one of the greatest causes of Shasan Prabhavna. If you look at the example of Akbar and Champa Shravika, who had fasted for 6 months, who was fasting for 6 months, 180 days, uh, she was taken in a grand procession uh, in the streets of Fatehpur Sikri, and Akbar's two ministers themselves were, carrying her in a palki. So when Akbar saw the palanquin from his balcony, from his window, he was quite amazed at, why are my ministers carrying a lady like this in a grand procession of this sort? And when Akbar inquires as to who this lady is, what has she done, uh, so remarkable that even everyone is treating her in this way. There's elephants and animals and pomp and glory and music uh, playing all around her, and people are hailing her everywhere. And that's when he gets to know that this lady has fasted for 180 days, and Akbar summons her. He tries to investigate as to whether she was really fasting only on boiled water, or whether it was all a scandal of sorts. And he investigates the truth of it. After which he asks how she got the strength. The lady in turn also replies that this was due to the blessings of my Dev and Guru. She doesn't take the credit for herself. She only says Dev Guru Pasai. And Akbar is curious about who this Dev and Guru are. So she introduces uh, Arihant Paramatma and her Guru Bhagwant Jagat Guru Hir Sarishwari Maharaja to Akbar, because of which Akbar summons Hir Sarishwari Maharaja, because of which Hir Sarishwari Maharaja comes there. He is able to do extreme Shasan Pavana for years and years and years, and he basically made his name immortal in the Jain Shasan and in the history of India by indirectly also influencing a Mughal emperor to stop the slaughter of animals for as long as 6.5 months in an entire year. So, in the root of all of this, you see it is the Shasan Prabhavna done by one procession.
Wow. So basically, where some amount of violence can be permitted if it leads to greater good.
Well, uh, there's no reason of violence being permitted in this sense, because the violence that is talked about here is in the nature of Swarup Hinsa, and for Shravaks who are already engaged in the violence of Sthavar Jeev and also unintentionally in the violence of Tras Jeev, activities that they do involve some degree of Swarup Hinsa for sure. And there are activities even that Sadhu Bhagwans do, even of those that would condemn processions otherwise, even those activities involve some element of Swarup Hinsa for sure. It could be uh, in the nature of sadhus crossing a river. It could be in the nature of Shravaks cooking food for fellow Shravaks for sadharmic bhakti. It could be in the nature of Shravaks cooking food for sadhus in extraordinary circumstances, and etc. Any dharmic activity that you see until a very higher gunasthanak is always going to be accompanied by some form of Surupins or the other.
Okay, now I understand better. Thank you.
No worries, Pavitra Bhai. Are there any more questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll end the Swadhyay here. Thank you, everyone. Pranam and good night.
Thank you. Pranam.
Thank